everyone, and welcome to today's Public Media Women in Leadership webinar, Next Generation Fundraising Strategies. We have a fantastic lineup for you, experts on the topic. My name is Carol Sorber. I'm the Director of Professional Development at PBS, and I've been working with Deanna Mackey and the PMWL committee to bring you a series of webinars to help build your skills and advance your career. We collected your responses to a survey back a couple of months ago, and this is one of the topics that you said that you chose as important to your career. Before we get started, I want to give you some housekeeping. Let's just get the housekeeping out of the way. We are recording the webinar. Watch our Facebook page for the link to the recording. We'll post it as soon as it's available. We'll also provide a copy of today's slide deck as well. I would ask everyone to mute your audio if you're not speaking. This will help everyone hear the speakers, and it'll also help things run a little bit more smoothly. Please also use the chat box to ask questions. You can submit your questions anytime during the webinar, and we'll get to them in between speakers. So now let's meet our panelists. We have Shane Guiter, founder of Public Works. He's going to tell you about what he sees as the next generation of fundraising strategies. You may be surprised to learn that some of what you're doing may be right. You may be right all along, but he's going to show you how to stay ahead of the curve and keep that updated for the 21st century. Melanie Coulson is Executive Director for Membership Station Services at Guiter Public. She'll tell you about a tool that they use or they have available to you to help diagnose your development efforts and plan more effectively. And finally, Tracy Ferrier, Director of Development Services at PBS, will talk about the tools and resources and opportunities available from PBS to support fundraising at your station. So let's get started. Shane Guiter is the founder of Public Works. Shane is passionate about building the future of public media. He's a proven leader and public speaker. Shane commands a diverse skill set that includes fundraising and development, marketing, digital and social media, and operations. Shane believes in strengthening public media by increasing value to local communities through meaningful content and engagement and the creation of lasting partnerships. Please welcome Shane Guiter.
Okay, so I want to just take a minute to thank everybody for taking the time from your busy day to come and join us and talk about this topic. It's something that I know many of you are passionate about. In looking at the folks that are participating in the webinar right now, some of my fundraising heroes are on this webinar right now. And, you know, I don't want to call anybody out, but thanks to everybody for being a part of this. I want to kind of start out by saying that, you know, when I was a fundraiser at KLRU in Austin years ago, I became convinced that the key to success in raising money was to integrate our approach to fundraising, to take all of the different kinds of fundraising that we were doing and sort of pull all those together. And so that the same message was resonating across all of the different channels of fundraising that we were doing. And in the time since I was a fundraiser, both as a head of operations at KCPT in Kansas City, and while I was at PBS, working with stations and the staff at PBS to build Passport, I kind of took that definition in my mind a step further and went from, we don't need to just integrate our different fundraising efforts together. We really need to integrate our entire organizations together in order to fundraise. You know, I think a lot of times at public media companies, the folks that are doing the fundraising, the folks that are doing marketing, the folks that are doing content, the folks that are taking care of operations, and all of those different groups of folks and teams all sort of operate independently and think very independently about what they do. And I think taking down those silos is sort of the first step towards where we need to go in the future. A few years back, a person who owns a number of newspapers. I was having a conversation with him, and I asked him, is there anything that I can sort of take back to public media that I can use to make public media more relevant? And this piece of advice really struck a chord with me. And I think it applies to most of what I have to say about the future, whether that's content, that's distribution, it's marketing, or it's fundraising at PBS and NPR stations. A lot of what we need to think through is not necessarily, hey, what is the latest and greatest thing that's happening? You know, sometimes we just need to take a look at how we did these things in the past. What were the problems that we were trying to solve? How to get funding from individuals, how to get funding from major donors. What we need to do is think through, how do we solve those same problems using today's technology? I think that's kind of an important part of what we need to talk about today. So I recently left PBS to create a company that is working to help media companies evolve and expand their relevance. And I think that the two things on the screen, great design and simplicity, are a couple of the superpowers that we need to develop when we think through what the future of fundraising looks like. Taking the first one, you know, design isn't only what something looks like, it's also how it works. And simplicity, in my experience, drives adoption. It makes decision making happen faster, and it brings in donations. You know, users always have the option to end a transaction midstream if they feel like the experience that they're having is not a good one. And oftentimes, more often than not, that's exactly what happens. People back out of making a decision to fundraise. I think this is an important lesson that I've learned over my time of working in fundraising and working in public media. And I think that it is really important for us because you know, often, especially on fundraising teams, we tend to think through and organize our work around what's best for us, what's going to make things easier for our database manager or for different folks in our organization. How can we set up and make processes that are going to work for the folks on staff? And I think that we make folks go through a lot of hoops, whether that's watching programs or whether it's attending our events or giving donations. And I think we need to flip that around. We have to begin to think about our organizations, I think, as products. Not just the content that we make, but the entire organization, thinking of it as a product. And when we begin to think of our users then as customers that are consuming our product, you know, we really need to map out the path that we want those customers to take. How do we want them to discover us? How do we want them to deepen their relationship, to become fans or super fans, and ultimately to give us support? I again think that thinking through things from the customer perspective is a really important part of how we're going to do this in the future. I think this is sort of part and parcel of the same thing, right? Removing friction is sort of the definition of what the internet does. And in our world, the internet is, you know, taking things and it is making friction, making difficulty go away. When you're talking about doing fundraising or consuming content or doing anything else. And the way that this applies to us, I think, in the media world is as we migrate to the internet and as we move all of our platforms there, I think we have to examine friction as it exists all through the process, and we have to get rid of that friction. I think when it comes to PBS and NPR stations, I think there are sort of two things that I found in my career, raising money for content, and also paying attention to technology. Um, I have a theory, and it is that these are the foundations of our future revenue. I think one is a task best done locally in philanthropy, and digital membership is best done when we all get together and do it at scale. I think that that these two methods of fundraising are super important to our future. And I think a lot of when we think through what is the next thing? Where is the future going to be? It's often not in the type of fundraising that we're doing. It's often around the tool. I want to sort of take philanthropy and take digital and talk about them just for a couple of minutes in some different ways. Philanthropy needs to get more specific, in my opinion. You'll hear me say more about this, but we need to take on and solve specific problems. And here's an example. Instead of saying we need your gift so that we can do good in the community, sort of that generalized, hey, we do a lot of good and you should give us a gift in order to do that. Try this on for size. We're tackling child hunger this year in our community. And here are all of the different ways, from content to events, to newsletters and apps and digital products that we're creating to tackle child hunger in our community. Do you want to be a part of tackling child hunger? Do you want to be our partner in this year? I think that sort of approach is an approach in philanthropy that's going to find a lot more success than the approach we've had in the past, which is just to basically talk about PBS programs, talk about local programs, and then talk about the generalized outreach work that we do in the community. I think that digital scale is pretty simple. It costs as much to get the first donor as it does to get the 1,000th donor. Once we've built the platform in order to get digital membership, in order to get contributors to come in, once that's done, the rest of the donors come in at a cost that is virtually nothing. I think that Passport in the PBS world is a pretty great example of fundraising at scale, and it's having success at a lot of different stations. I want to sort of throw this up really quickly as just a way of maybe talking a little bit about the cost to raise a dollar, the ROI in fundraising. As we sort of take a look at the cost of doing different types of fundraising that we've traditionally focused on in the past, you'll see that the ROI for telemarketing, for TV pledge drives, is not as high as we'd like it to be. Direct mail is better, but it's still a costly way to do fundraising. When we begin to look at philanthropy, digital giving and planned giving, the fundraising that I've been talking about so far on this call, you can see that the return on a dollar invested in those types of fundraising is, on average, gets you a greater return. And I think that today, all of our energies are going into pledge and direct mail, much of our energies. And I think when we think about our relevance and think about growing our audience, I think that philanthropy, digital giving, is something that is going to get us a better return. And just to make a point, because I think there are a lot of stations that are still on the journey of learning the importance of planned giving. Planned giving is something that is low cost. It doesn't take a lot of energy. It just takes a consistent drumbeat. And it is, I think, one of the best ways that an organization can fund future efforts. We're all sort of in the subscription business, aren't we? And media, both TV, movies, music, digital apps, news organizations are really all moving to a subscription model. And as we keep saying and studying what are the new business models that we need to get into, I think it is important that we also focus on subscriptions, because it's frankly a business that we've been in for the last 50 years. I think that we need to change the tools that we use in membership and the way we think about membership. I think we need to, again, going back to that definition of innovation, we really need to take a look at how we can solve membership problems with new tools. But there's a lot here that we're already good at and that we already understand. And sort of speaking of an organization that's moving to and more understanding a subscription model, the New York Times is really in a race right now to fund its news operations through digital subscriptions before their print revenue slowly dies away and disappears. And frankly, they're succeeding. They need about $875 million a year in digital revenue to pay for their newsroom and their digital platforms. Right now, they're at $579 million a year, and they're projecting to be at $900 million by 2020, which would surpass their goal. Their marketing campaigns, I don't know if you've noticed them lately, but they sound like PBS and NPR fundraising pitches. I want to, speaking of digital subscription revenue, Netflix is spending $7 billion on content next year. And I'd ask you, as we think through our funding future in public media, how much are we at PBS and NPR stations and also at the national level, how much are we investing in content? Both Amazon and Netflix are really interesting to me when it comes to thinking through future revenue. In my mind, they're sort of defining excellence in the video on demand space, and both are succeeding by continuing to create subscriber lock-in. And once they have a subscriber, they keep them by adding more and more content and services. And it's interesting to me that Netflix doesn't do sports or news. And I would argue that they're never going to get into those businesses. And that's because they invest in content that will be around for a long time. The shows that make people join today are the shows that other people discover later, and they're the shows that future folks are going to join as a result of. So Stranger Things is something that, if you're already a Netflix subscriber, is something that makes you excited and delighted to watch a new season of it. But there are plenty of folks out there that are joining Netflix today that are going to get to experience that show for the first time. And I would ask us to think through, as we're thinking through the future of public media, what are we doing to get subscriber lock-in? What are we doing to make ourselves more relevant, and what kind of things are we doing that are going to get people to stick around in the future? Over the last few years, PBS and stations partnered to create a platform for delivering benefits to members. Passport is converting thousands of viewers into donors at scale. Every station is that I have heard from and that I'm talking to is having success with Passport. And one of the great things is 70% of these donors are sustainers, and they're joining, 70% are also joining for the first time. And this is a platform that's just getting started. It can expand, it can grow. And if we were going to build a fundraising model from scratch today, as opposed to 50 or 40 years ago, I think that Passport's looks a lot like what membership would look like if we were creating it today. I said a few minutes ago that we in public media are experts at the subscription business, but I think our tools are not as sharp as competitors, as other folks that are doing this work. And I think we need to spend some time finding new tools and practices that will work both now and in the future. And I sort of wanted to show an example, and it's on the screen right now. Gimlet is a podcast network, and I know lots and lots of podcast networks and lots of folks that are running subscription newsletters for money that are using a tool called Memberful. And this is what it looks like on the front end of a website. You can see that there are buttons for me to join now at $5 a month or join at $60. This is what it looks like when I click one of those buttons. I put in my name, my email address. This is if I'm joining for the first time. Choose a password and put in my credit card information and click the blue button, and I'm done. If I have used this tool with any other organization in the past, my information is already stored. And so it's even easier for me to decide, or for a user to decide to join. As a result of joining Gimlet or some other subscription service using Memberful, I'm actually able to go in and take a look at my subscription. I'm able to see the subscriptions, the different offers that I've joined. I'm able to update my card information or my address. I'm able to go in and cancel my own subscription when I want to, or I can go in and give more money if I want to. And to me, this is kind of a cool way of thinking through membership. And again, I think if we were thinking about how to invent this for the future today, this is what it would look like, and it already exists. You know, just to breeze past this quickly, but we spend a lot of time thinking through new donor databases and new donor technology and how we're going to do this. Memberful is a company that's already doing this at scale, and I know some of the folks that are subscribing to some of these podcast networks and other folks that are using Memberful have as many members as a lot of our public media organizations. And if you take a look at the pricing structure, it's interesting to think $100 a month versus what some of us are spending in infrastructure technology. This is, in my mind, the digital fundraising transition. And again, as I spoke about earlier, it runs across a lot of different parts of our organization. It's thinking about TV production and distribution from the perspective of on-demand video. It's thinking about, instead of thinking about doing tune-in marketing, it's thinking about, hey, how can we build user relationships? How can we get folks to view more videos via Passport? And how can we get them to sign up through that platform? And it's thinking about membership, not in terms of pledge or direct mail or telemarketing, but thinking more in terms of a platform like Passport and like doing email marketing, because I think that email is the hidden secret that a lot of us have in front of us, but we aren't using as effectively as we could. As I'm talking to a lot of different clients around the country, this is one of the things that I'm sort of focused on in terms of helping stations understand their relationship with PBS. And to me, it's about partnering from the perspective of providing public services that are connected to PBS programming or things that only your organization can do. It's also developing digital distribution, digital marketing, digital fundraising, using that PBS or NPR platform to do fundraising and do marketing and share your local content at scale. And then it's partnering potentially with PBS and NPR to produce local content for network distribution. I think as we think through how we connect, how we market, and how we create content, and how we fundraise, one of the secrets to that success is going to be thinking through what are the things that only our organization can do, and focusing all of our efforts on those things. And here are just a few examples in my mind. Doing great local content, doing education and kids things, including potentially doing professional development for teachers, and doing civic projects in our in our communities, and thinking through the question of who we might partner with. This to me is a list of tools that we should think through as we think about what the future looks like in the next few years. Again, you've heard me talk about Passport a lot. Peer-to-peer fundraising is something that we should be working on. I want to warn everybody that peer-to-peer fundraising for an organization like a local PBS or NPR station or a joint licensee, in order to get successful, is about a 3-year journey. So don't get into the beginnings of peer-to-peer fundraising, realize you don't have a feel for it right off the bat, and then jump back out of it. Take the time to develop it slowly, because it'll take time for your team to learn how to get good at doing peer-to-peer, and it'll take time for folks in your community to learn that this is an exciting, cool way to do fundraising. I talked about email marketing earlier and email fundraising. I don't think we do enough of that, and I don't think that our pitches are focused enough on our actual content. Simplifying our infrastructure, I think, is something that's a super important tool. Getting staff focused on major giving and planned giving. I think we've got a long history of membership. I think that we often think that we've got a program around major giving, but I think that could, I think that we often define mid-level giving as major giving. And I think that we should all be thinking through strategic planning and building cases for support. And when you build cases for support and you connect that with the user journeys that we were talking about earlier, I think that you've got a really exciting formula for success. I wanted to drill in on Passport for just a second and remind everybody that it is a platform in form and function. I think that there are tons and tons of ideas that could be done via Passport that haven't been thought of or tackled yet. It's not just a tool for video on demand. It can be an infrastructure tool that helps us all do fundraising at scale. I think that aligning your marketing efforts with video on demand, when you've got local content that you're putting into Passport, I think, and new series coming on board like Ken Burns Vietnam, I think it's important to align your marketing strategies around those things, as opposed to getting people to tune in one time for broadcast. I think that marketing dollars in the digital realm are cheaper, and they go further. Tying together content, engagement, marketing, and fundraising into one thing around the service of Passport is I think, really important, and thinking about how to make it easy for folks to get into the tool. I wanted to throw up some fun red flags. When I'm talking to an organization about fundraising or about strategic planning, or about how they can align their organization, these are some things that I often hear that give me pause. We can't do future stuff until we get that new database. Should we get an app? Do we need a new website? Should we be testing text to give? We need to set up a table and get some iPads in order to collect email addresses at events. We need to be tapping into big data. The answers to a lot of these questions might be yes, but these are, I bring these up as red flags because they are not silver bullets. I think that you can be doing valuable work in the data realm without getting a new database, without getting new services. I don't think that you need an app because, frankly, I feel like NPR One, PBS, and the PBS apps are our apps, and we should be taking advantage of those and exploiting them. And so these are just some red flags I wanted to throw up. These are, I think, are some directions that we need to be thinking through. What are the things that we can measure? How can we increase participation? What do our folks want? How do we do research on what our folks want and what they need? What are the education services that we can offer that we're not offering today? How can we better use the PBS or NPR digital platforms for our own exploitation and benefit? And how do we make decisions faster? I think that's a super important one. I don't think we make decisions nearly fast enough. I wanted to talk a little bit, just touch for a moment on culture. I think that this may be the most important thing for us to think through. How do we create a culture of innovation? And I think that knowing what your organization's priorities are and making sure that everybody knows those. Don't create projects, don't create series, don't create fundraising drives, create business plans. Think through all of the different things, how we're going to market something, how we're going to fundraise for it, how we're going to pay for it, what's the return on investment going to be. Working collaboratively is an important thing. I think that what I've found in terms of moving across silos and working across teams is giving credit for successes and taking credit yourself for when things don't go right. Goes a long way. Starting small and building consensus, I think, is an important way for someone in any organization at any level to be successful. And finally, you know, we often talk about how leadership isn't supporting us. I want everybody to make sure, sometimes you can't do something always about your leadership not supporting you, but I think it's super important for you to be a leadership example no matter what level you're at in your organization. Just to sort of wrap up, I think anytime you're thinking through how to do fundraising, I think it's super important that you think through, hey, if we were building this from scratch, what would our fundraising look like? When I ran fundraising at a station, I used to ask this question of myself and my staff all the time. Hey, if we were doing this from scratch, how would we do it? When you ask yourself that question on an ongoing basis, you'll find that you tend to come up with a lot of the future answers and techniques that you need. And finally, I think that our greatest threat is not fundraising. It's not a loss of federal funding or state funding or pledge drives going down. I think that our greatest threat in the future is a loss of relevance. If we as organizations lose relevance and continue to lose relevance, no matter what fundraising approach we use, and no matter how we do fundraising, we will not be successful. But if we are creating content and experiences and creating services that folks in our community want, that they need, then the fundraising techniques that we use will continue to be successful. And that's kind of all I've got for you today. I'm happy to take questions, or we can move on and take questions at the end.
Well, we have time for a few questions. So thanks, Shane. That was fantastic. I want to encourage you to, Colleen is cheering. I want to encourage everyone to type your questions in the chat box. In the meantime, Colleen Wilson asks, Shane, have you done research about lifetime value? For instance, which segments have the highest lifetime value, such as folks who bequeath might have a higher lifetime value?
You know, one of the things that I think is most, to that specific question, one of the things I think is most interesting about developing planned giving, thinking of lifetime value, folks that commit to a planned gift tend to increase their annual giving by 50 to 100%. I think that stations calculating value calculating the lifetime value of a customer is something that any station can do and every station should be doing. Thinking through what are the things that we can measure, I think are super important. Another thing that I think is important is what is the cost to bring someone on board, to get somebody for the first time. You know, I used to measure this a lot when I was in charge of fundraising at a station. And I also used to then think of, you know, tracking those renewal statistics. How much are we spending to keep someone, and tracking those things over time. And I think looking at those statistics are super important. I, in general, am always trying to think, what are the things that I can measure, and how do I and how do I track those on a regular basis?
Great, thanks. The next question is from Becky Myers. She's curious about the providing of public services connected with programming. What are some specific examples that aren't solely connected with production?
Well, I think that there is a tremendous amount of potential in thinking through outside of the programming sphere, how we might take educational services and partnerships at the local level and tie them in with future success and sustainability. I think that I know of a couple of interesting examples of stations that are getting into the business of helping school systems do professional development work for teachers, or are creating with partners healthy family initiatives. I think there's a lot that we can do there. I think overall, one of the things that I think locally we're going to transition to in the next few years is something that takes this question even a step deeper. I think in the next few years, we're going to stop thinking of PBS content as and services as our product, and we're going to begin to think of them as marketing for the work that we're creating at the local level. I think that the value in terms of local fundraising in the future, yes, PBS is going to be a great way to bring people closer to us, to sort of bring people into the funnel. But I think in the future, the content that we're creating locally and the services that we're doing at a local level and the partnerships that we're doing in terms of civic projects are going to be the kind of things that actually get people to give us money.
Great, thanks so much. We're going to move on now to Melanie Coulson. Thanks, Shane. Melanie is the Executive Director for Membership Station Services at Guiter Public. She oversees all educational and advisory services for the talented development and corporate support professionals at stations around the country. Melanie's going to tell you about a tool that Guiter Public offers to help you diagnose your development efforts. Please welcome Melanie Coulson.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Because I just had a note come up on the screen that said it wasn't talking to my mic, and I was like, oh, perfect timing. Thank you so much for having me here today, and thanks for inviting me and the time. It was really great, and I just want to build a little bit off of what Shane was talking about and give you an example of what we've been working on with stations at Guiter Public in the online revenue detector. Oh, there I am. So really quickly, the online revenue detector is a tool that stations, our membership stations, said they wanted us to build and help them figure out and crack this nut around online revenue. And Shane was talking a little bit about the red flags that he sees where people are like, do we need an app? Do we need to be doing text to give? Some of these things. In talking with stations, we found that what they really, the heart of what needed to be done and what they were interested in were the basics and how to get a lot better at online giving. So the first iteration of the quiz was 12 questions. We're now up to 15. It covers everything, as you can see, again, basics, email growth, email fundraising effectiveness, fundraising around your website, and we're diving more in with the new questions we added this year into the mobile space and looking at some questions around that. So really quickly today, what I just wanted to hit on with you was we have had over 100 stations now complete the quiz. It's been up for about 18 months, and we really see it as a living, breathing thing. So we've been adding questions, as I said, and helping, getting feedback about how it's going. So we've had over 100 stations take the quiz, about 65 of them complete it. And so here are some of the things, the top line things that we're hearing and thinking about that I thought might be helpful to you today to learn more about. So one of the strengths, how are we doing in terms of online giving forms being mobile responsive? We're doing a great job at that. 82% of stations say yes, indeed. When it comes to mobile giving, they have a form that's responsive. Another strength is that we're doing a really good job of growing our email lists. Right here we show you 59% of folks said that indeed they have email addresses for about 55% of their active donors. And the one caveat of this I want to point out to you is that 26% didn't know. And that's when you think about the ROI when it comes to email, when you think about the ROI when it comes to just digital engagement, 1 in 4 folks taking the quiz not knowing is quite a bit. So to me, that's a really important number to focus on. So now our weaknesses, and we know they're there. Was around net email list growth and management. And so again, the question here, what is your email's net list growth? Was it more than the average 11% per year? 22% of folks said yes. The vast majority said no. Again, going back to that idea of like, show me you know me, connecting the dots between givers, supporters, listeners, viewers, and your station, and making the case for support is so important. And so every way you can do that, you should be. And so continuing to grow that list is important. Again, the one thing that threw us off a little bit here is 24% of stations didn't know that number. So we feel like that's really, if you're going to start somewhere, you have to at least know where you're at to make improvements on that. So there are some things where stations told us these are important things that we need to know, but we haven't quite figured out what the answer should be. And then there were some questions like this where we've decided this is an important thing to start having a discussion about, and let's see where stations are with it. So we know that during pledge drives, during on-air drives, TV and radio, is that our websites become big cash machines, right? We have a lot of online giving coming and going through there. But how is your website converting the rest of the year? And the benchmark here was website visitors. Did you get 0.6% conversion rate where they actually then went ahead and made a gift? And as you can see, the vast majority of stations aren't collecting that data and learning about it. So, that's another thing to think about, where the 300 and some days of the year that you're not doing pledge, how well is your website doing at converting folks and making the case for giving? And that's as simple as, making sure the donate button shows up on every page of your site, collecting email addresses and engaging with people in different ways, and making the case on different pages, whether that's through videos or just direct call to action. And bravo to the 10% who knew that. I suspect some of those folks are on this call, so way to go. So another point where the jury is still out on this is, and this is probably the most important piece of this presentation to me, is your online giving experience easy and compelling? And Shane was talking about this too. We're just really removing the friction points, making things smooth and easy for folks. And so this is a question about, is your giving form completion better than 15%? And 15% is a benchmark of not just public media stations, but we also looked at some Blackbaud target donor-centrics analytics, and as well as the benchmark report from M&R to come up with this number. And so 67% of the folks don't know that number. And to me, as a fundraising professional, that's as important as knowing your renewal and your retention rates, as well as how well you're acquiring members. It's first year retention, all those things. This should be right up there and something that you just pop off the top of your head. And then if you're a manager, it's something you can easily ask about. So just really quickly to summarize the numbers I've shared with you. How can the online revenue detector help your station? Again, we look at this as a way to also break down silos so that folks have the opportunity to measure shared goals, prioritizing, again, the strategies. The questions are really, we'll skip to the end, Deanna, because I know I'm about out of time here. But the revenue detector is just a great way for people to sit down across departments, take the test together. It's really easy to do. It's yes, no, maybe, and out comes the answers. And because we're agnostic about the answers, you can get all of them regardless of how you answer. And we really feel like it's a way for stations to sit down and come up with a really great strategic plan around how to improve online giving relatively quickly.
Tracy is going to tell you about some of the opportunities and resources available from development services at PBS.
Yes, thank you. And I'll go through this pretty quickly. I know we want to get out on time. Just real quickly, Melanie, I think that's an awesome tool that you guys have. And one of the things that we've heard from our stations is how much they want to partner with both Greater Public and PBS to build their capacity in order to help them deepen their services to their community. So I feel like we're both here to help them do that. PBS Development Services actually just came back to PBS a couple years ago, 2014, so kind of new still. Really quickly, on our website, which I'll show you later, you can find out a little bit more who we are. We're a team of 10 professionals with a pretty interesting, diverse background in fundraising. We have more than 33 years of station experience, large, medium, and small. And our goal, of course, is to help stations increase and diversify your opportunities for making more and more revenue. In the interest of time, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about on this slide, so I'm not going to talk my way through it. But one of the things that's really important to us, and we think to you, is the fact that we work really closely with a 13-person development advisory committee that's made up of your peers across the system. And we work with them to help determine what the best strategy and focus should be of development services. And we try to identify what's going to have the biggest impact on your financial sustainability. So these are some of the resources that PBS Development Services brings to the table. First of all, we have a great cohort and engagement project. This is where we're able to create collaborative group environments to test different fundraising strategies, like maybe IP targeting or the Twitch project, which was really fun. And we also like to create opportunities to bring stations and donors together through special events like the Gershwin Award. And this is actually happening here in DC right now. We've got stations and their major donors here in town. And the whole idea of this is to engage major donors more deeply in the mission of public television. So again, we're trying to encompass a variety of areas within development. We've got the Sustainer Growth Initiative that's out there. It's wrapping up in a couple of months, and then we'll be sharing the results of the project with the system. Driving digital awareness is always, as well, a real top priority for our team, as are other areas of the high potential growth, such as plan giving, and that's something that Shane mentioned as well. The ROI on plan giving is really tremendous, and we need to focus as many resources as we can there. Station success stories, this is probably one of my favorite elements of what we offer to stations, and we share station success stories in different ways, mostly through blog posts that we have or webinars, and of course we're at conferences. So we'll have sessions and encourage stations to actually share what's working with them, and in some instances what's not working. I mean, if somebody tried something and they failed, it's just as important to learn that as well. Each post will share some insight into what's happening in the system and share with you what your peers are doing and what they're thinking. And hopefully you'll share with us what you're doing. Just as an example, WNET reached out to us a year ago to let us know that they were piloting and testing some new pledge techniques. We've covered them throughout the year. We did a webinar on them, and the entire system was fascinated with what's going on. And we want to tell stories. So I'm encouraging you, this is my plug, please let us know what you're doing. And of course, you can see at the bottom the development awards. So if you want to know more about what your peers are doing that have seen some recognition, we have those on our website as well. Merging products and technology. So I think that I speak for a lot of stations when we say thank you to those of you who are able to test some of these emerging products and technologies, some of the things that Shane talked about earlier. If you have the capacity to test and engage your staff in trying some new things, we're very grateful and happy to work with you, and we are also happy to share. So following each test or pilot project that we pull together, we'll produce a case study or a white paper that will summarize the findings of the study and of course provide recommendations for adoption, tools that are developed to help everyone, and this can be from small, medium to large stations. We try to break it down into points that are going to be applicable for a small station with a small staff with a little lower capacity, all the way up to those who have a bigger staff. Everything that'll help you navigate this world of digital fundraising a little bit better. And professional development. I think sharing knowledge is really what it's all about. We want to make sure that everything we learn that we're sharing with you, and we do this through as many different channels as possible. You can see on the top left, we've got a digital fundraising white paper, A Tale of Two Systems. Very valuable. It's a great way to share what we're learning. There's formalized training in the form of CSPI for corporate support. Of course, we're at conferences all year round, and we've got a new Webinar Wednesday schedule that's trying to keep us consistently delivering things that are new and upcoming and things that we're learning on a daily basis or weekly. Almost done. And resources and tools, we have lots of these. They go from one sheets to the Season of Giving toolkit, the Ducks in the Row campaign. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the 9 reasons to love PBS. We did inserts and cards. There's a lot of tools and assets, proposals, videos, on-air spots, all sorts of stuff. And my final slide is, of course, where you can access all of these tools and assets. 2 things I wanted to point you to. The Development Services website, you can access at pbs.org/development. At the top of the website, if you can see it, there are a few tabs. It'll tell you about us, of course, the resource list, case studies, there's calendar, and of course the blog lists all the blog posts that we've written. It's a great way to find out where everything is, because if you've tried to access stuff through PBS, you know that it could be in the source, it could be under mypbs.org. It's in a variety of places, and that's okay. Everything that we have, though, is linked within this website. So use this website. The other thing I would encourage you to do to stay in touch is to sign up or subscribe for our Spotlight newsletter. We put it out every other week. This is the subscribe button is right there on the bottom right side of our website. You can see it on the screen. Just subscribe every 2 weeks. It kind of just covers everything that we're producing and putting out there, talks about conferences that are coming up, really just keeps you in the know with what's going on with PBS Development Services. And that's it for me.
Great. Thanks so much, Tracy. I noticed that there was a question on the chat box, and it looks like from Colleen, but it looks like Melanie probably answered that. Melanie also wanted everyone to know that you can check out the quiz if you're not a member of Greater Public. She'll get you a short-term pass to check it out. Just email her directly, and she'll take care of that for you. There is a survey for this webinar. We truly want you to complete that survey for us. I think Deanna posted it at the top of the chat log. I can't find it, but it must be there. Also, I think I just want to thank Shane and Melanie and Tracy for their time and effort to bring you this information. A big thank you to Deanna Mackey for running the Zoom platform for us today and organizing Public Media Women in Leadership, which offers fantastic support for women in public media. The next webinar is scheduled for January. The exact date and time and topic are still being determined. You should watch for details on our Facebook page. And finally, we're in the process of planning a face-to-face get-together at PBS Technology Conference in Las Vegas. So stay tuned for more details about that in the coming months. Again, thank you. And oh, there's one more question. Okay, I think that's a conversation going on between Melanie and Colleen. So the chat log is still open, but I think we've reached the end of our webinar today. So if you have to drop off, please do so. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.